The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Royal Lodge as Princess Beatrice sat across from her younger sister Eugenie at the mahogany breakfast table. The weight of recent conversations with their father, Prince Andrew, hung heavy in the air between them. Both women, now in their 30s, found themselves at a crossroads that would define not just their own futures, but the very nature of their relationship with the British royal family. Beatrice, at 35, had always been the more reserved of the two sisters. Her struggles with dyslexia during childhood had shaped her into someone who approached challenges with careful consideration and unwavering determination. She had built a successful career in technology and consulting, deliberately staying away from the spotlight that seemed to follow every move of the younger generation of royals. Her marriage to Edoardo Mapelli-Mazzi in 2020 had given her a sense of stability and purpose beyond her royal duties, and their daughter Sienna had brought new meaning to her life. Eugenie, 3 years younger, possessed a different energy entirely. Where Beatrice was cautious, Eugenie was bold. Where Beatrice preferred privacy, Eugenie embraced the public aspects of royal life with genuine enthusiasm. Her work with anti-slavery organizations and her role as a patron of various charities had earned her respect beyond the confines of the palace walls. Her marriage to Jack Brooksbank and the birth of their two sons, August and Ernest, had solidified her position as a modern royal mother who balanced tradition with contemporary values. The sisters had always been close, united by the unique challenges of growing up as the daughters of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. Their childhood had been marked by their parents' very public divorce, the constant media scrutiny, and the ever-present question of their place within the royal hierarchy. Unlike their cousins William and Harry, who had clear paths laid out before them, Beatrice and Eugenie had to carve their own way through the complex world of modern monarchy. The conversation that morning centered around a letter they had both received from Buckingham Palace. King Charles III, in his ongoing effort to streamline the monarchy, was requesting a private meeting with both sisters to discuss their future roles within the institution. The message was diplomatically worded, but the underlying meaning was clear. Decisions needed to be made about whether they would continue to receive any form of royal support or if they would transition to completely independent lives. This wasn't entirely unexpected. Ever since their father's association with Jeffrey Epstein had come to light, followed by the civil lawsuit and his subsequent withdrawal from public duties, both sisters had felt the ground shifting beneath their feet. The monarchy, under Charles's leadership, was moving toward a more focused model that centered around the direct line of succession. Working royals would be limited to those who were essential to the institution's core functions. Beatrice folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table between them. "We knew this day would come," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years of uncertainty. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Eugenie leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through the implications. She had always enjoyed the charitable work that came with being a royal, but she had also built her own career in the art world. Her position at Hauser and Wirth Gallery had given her financial independence and professional satisfaction that existed entirely separate from her royal status. Yet the thought of completely severing ties with the institutional side of royal life felt like losing a part of her identity. "I've been thinking about this for months," Eugenie admitted, "even before this letter arrived. Jack and I have talked about it extensively. We want our boys to have normal lives, but we also want them to understand their heritage and the responsibilities that come with it." The sisters discussed their father's situation at length. Prince Andrew's withdrawal from royal duties had been a necessary step, but it had left them in an ambiguous position. They had continued to attend family events and maintain their charitable commitments, but without the official support or recognition that came with being working members of the royal family. They were royal by birth, but increasingly independent by necessity. Beatrice shared her concerns about the financial implications of a complete break from royal life. While both sisters had their own careers and sources of income, the security arrangements alone for their children represented a significant ongoing expense. The protection that came with their royal status wasn't just a luxury. It was a necessity given the level of public attention their family attracted. They talked about their mother, Sarah Ferguson, and how she had navigated her own complex relationship with the royal family after her divorce from Prince Andrew. Sarah had maintained her title as the Duchess of York, but had built an independent life as an author, spokesperson, and charity advocate. Her ability to reinvent herself multiple times had been both inspiring and cautionary for her daughters. The conversation turned to their children and the kind of future they wanted to provide for them. Beatrice's stepdaughter Wolfie, from Eduardo's previous relationship, along with their daughter Sienna, represented a new generation that would grow up with an even more complex understanding of royal heritage. Similarly, Eugenie's sons August and Ernest would need to navigate their own relationship with their royal lineage as they grew older. As they talked, both sisters began to realize that the letter from Buckingham Palace might actually represent an opportunity rather than just a challenge. For years, they had existed in a gray area, royal enough to attract constant media attention, but not royal enough to receive full institutional support. The chance to define their own relationship with the monarchy could allow them to maintain the aspects of royal life that were meaningful to them while gaining the freedom to pursue their own ambitions without constraint. Eugenie mentioned a conversation she had recently had with Zara Tyndall, their cousin who had successfully built a career in equestrian sports while maintaining her royal connections. Zara's model of being royal by birth, but independent by choice, had always appealed to both sisters. She attended family events, supported certain causes, but lived primarily as a private citizen with her own professional achievements and financial independence. The morning discussion stretched into the afternoon as they explored different scenarios. They could accept the king's streamlined approach and step back completely from any official royal duties, focusing entirely on their own careers and families. Alternatively, they could propose a hybrid model where they maintain some charitable commitments while making it clear that these activities were self-funded and independent of the crown's resources. Beatrice suggested they each spend the next few weeks thinking independently about what they truly wanted from their relationship with royal life. They would then come together to present a unified approach to their meeting with King Charles. Both sisters understood that whatever decision they made would likely be permanent and would affect not just them, but their children and future grandchildren. The weight of history pressed upon them as they considered their options. They were part of a 1,000-year-old institution, but they were also modern women with their own dreams, ambitions, and responsibilities. The challenge was finding a way to honor both aspects of their identity while creating a sustainable future for themselves and their families. As evening approached, they walked together through the gardens of Royal Lodge, the same paths they had run through as children when their world seemed simpler and their futures more certain. Now, as mothers and professionals in their own right, they faced decisions that would shape not only their own destinies, but potentially influence how future generations of non-direct heirs would relate to the monarchy. The conversation had clarified one crucial point. Whatever path they chose, they would choose it together. Their bond as sisters had been forged through years of shared challenges, and it would be their greatest strength as they navigated the uncertain waters ahead. The meeting with King Charles loomed in their near future, but they now had the beginnings of a plan and, more importantly, the confidence that they could face whatever came next as a united front. The decisions that lay ahead would require them to balance family loyalty with personal ambition, tradition with innovation, and public duty with private happiness. But as they stood together in the fading light of that crucial day, both sisters felt a sense of possibility rather than dread about what the future might hold. The weeks following their garden conversation had been filled with careful deliberation and quiet consultation. Beatrice and Eugenie had each taken time to discuss the situation with their husbands, close friends, and trusted advisors outside the royal circle. The approaching meeting with King Charles had given their discussions an urgency that focused their minds on what truly mattered to them. Beatrice found herself spending long hours in her home office, surrounded by notebooks filled with pros and cons lists, financial projections, and timeline scenarios. Her background in business strategy proved invaluable as she approached this personal crossroads with the same analytical rigor she might apply to a corporate restructuring. Eduardo had been supportive throughout the process, offering insights from his own experience in property development and understanding the complexities of building something independent while maintaining family relationships. The couple had discussed at length what complete independence might mean for their family. Eduardo had his own successful business, and Beatrice's consulting work had grown substantially in recent years. They could certainly maintain their current lifestyle without royal support, but the question went deeper than mere finances. It touched on identity, purpose, and the kind of legacy they wanted to leave for their children. Eugenie had approached the decision-making process differently, spending time with the organizations she supported and the people whose lives had been impacted by her charity work. She visited a safe house for trafficking survivors in London, where she had been working as a patron for several years. The conversations with the residents and staff reminded her why she had been drawn to this work in the first place, and whether she needed royal status to continue making a meaningful difference. During one particularly moving conversation with a young woman who had escaped forced labor, Eugenie realized that her effectiveness as an advocate came not from her title, but from her genuine commitment and the platform she had built through her own efforts. The woman spoke about how Eugenie's willingness to listen and learn had meant more to her than any formal ceremony or official recognition. Jack had been characteristically supportive, understanding that whatever decision they made would affect their sons' futures in profound ways. As someone who had grown up outside the royal sphere, he brought a valuable perspective to their discussions. He could see both the privileges and the constraints that came with royal life, and he wanted his wife to choose based on what would bring her the most fulfillment and sense of purpose. The sisters had also reached out quietly to other members of the extended royal family who had navigated similar transitions. Lady Louise Windsor, their younger cousin, had recently made her own decision about university and her future relationship with royal duties. Though still young, Louise's thoughtful approach to balancing education with family expectations provided a useful model for thinking about choice and independence within royal life. Peter Phillips, their cousin who had always lived as a private citizen despite his royal lineage, shared valuable insights about raising children with royal heritage in a non-royal environment. His experiences, both positive and challenging, helped the sisters understand some of the practical implications of their potential decision. Peter's children grew up understanding their family history, while being free to pursue their own interests without the weight of public expectation. As the meeting with King Charles approached, both sisters had developed a clearer sense of their individual preferences, but they had also identified areas where they needed more information. The practical details of security arrangements, the ongoing use of titles, and the expectations around future family events remained unclear. They decided to prepare questions that would help them understand exactly what different levels of involvement might entail. Beatrice had researched historical precedents for royals who had stepped back from official duties while maintaining family relationships. She found examples from other European monarchies where family members had successfully transitioned to private careers while occasionally participating in state events or family celebrations. These models suggested that complete separation wasn't the only option and that there might be middle ground that would work for everyone involved. Eugenie had focused her preparation on understanding how their decision might impact their ongoing charity work. She had consulted with legal advisors about the implications for the organizations where she served as patron and explored whether these relationships could continue in a modified form. Her research suggested that many of her most effective contributions have been made through personal involvement rather than formal royal representation. The night before their meeting, the sisters met again at Beatrice's home in the Cotswolds. This time, their conversation had a different quality. The uncertainty that had marked their previous discussions had been replaced by a shared sense of clarity about their priorities and values. They had both reached similar conclusions through their separate processes of reflection and consultation. They spent the evening reviewing their questions and discussing their strategy for the meeting. Both sisters had decided that they wanted to propose a gradual transition rather than an immediate break. They hoped to negotiate a period where they could test different arrangements and find an approach that worked for everyone involved. This might involve stepping back from some official duties while maintaining others, or it might mean continuing certain charitable work while taking full financial responsibility for it. Beatrice shared research she had done into the costs of maintaining their current security arrangements and other practical needs. She had also explored options for generating additional income through her consulting work and potentially expanding into new areas of business. Her goal was to demonstrate that they could be financially self-sufficient while still contributing meaningfully to causes they cared about. Eugenie talked about conversations she had had with her colleagues at Hauser and Worth about potentially expanding her role or taking on additional responsibilities that would increase her earning potential. She had also explored opportunities in the nonprofit sector that might allow her to continue her advocacy work in a different capacity. Her research had shown that many successful advocates and activists operated independently of formal institutional support. As they prepared for sleep, both sisters acknowledged that they were nervous about the meeting, but also excited about the possibility of defining their own path forward. They had grown up in an environment where their roles and responsibilities were largely determined by their birth order and family position. The opportunity to actively choose their relationship with royal life represented a kind of freedom they had never experienced before. The morning of their meeting with King Charles dawned crisp and clear. Both sisters dressed carefully, choosing outfits that struck a balance between respect for the formal nature of the meeting and their emerging sense of independence. As they traveled together to Buckingham Palace, they reviewed their talking points one final time and reminded each other of their shared commitment to honesty and mutual support. The familiar surroundings of the palace carried different emotional weight that day. Corridors they had run through as children, rooms where they had attended family gatherings and official events, paintings and furniture that had been constant presences throughout their lives, all of these took on new significance as potential elements of a past they might be choosing to leave behind. As they waited in the anteroom outside the king's private study, both sisters felt the weight of the moment. They were about to have a conversation that would shape the rest of their lives and their children's understanding of their family heritage. Whatever emerged from this meeting, they knew there would be no going back to the ambiguous status they had occupied for the past several years. The door opened, and they were invited in to begin what would prove to be one of the most important conversations of their lives. King Charles rose to greet them, his expression warm but serious, clearly understanding the significance of the discussion they were about to have. The future of their family's relationship with the monarchy hung in the balance, and all three of them were prepared to approach the conversation with the honesty and respect it deserved. The king's private study felt different that afternoon than it had during previous family meetings. The warm autumn light filtering through the tall windows seemed to highlight the gravity of their conversation. King Charles had prepared for this meeting as carefully as his nieces had, understanding that the decisions made in this room would set important precedents for how the monarchy would evolve in the coming decades. He began by acknowledging the difficult position both sisters had found themselves in over recent years. The challenges their father had faced had created uncertainty not just for Prince Andrew himself, but for his daughters and their children. Charles expressed genuine sympathy for the way they had handled these circumstances with dignity and grace, continuing their charitable work and maintaining their family relationships despite the intense public scrutiny. Beatrice was the first to speak, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. She outlined the conclusions she and Eugenie had reached during their weeks of reflection. They appreciated the opportunity to have an open conversation about their future roles, and they understood the king's desire to create a more streamlined and focused monarchy. They had come to propose what they hoped would be a mutually beneficial arrangement. The sisters presented their idea for a gradual transition that would allow them to maintain family relationships and continue certain charitable commitments while taking full financial responsibility for their activities. They had prepared detailed proposals showing how they could fund their own security arrangements, travel costs, and office expenses. Their goal was to demonstrate that they could pursue meaningful work without placing any burden on the Crown's resources. King Charles listened carefully to their presentation, asking thoughtful questions about their financial projections and their plans for managing security concerns. He seemed particularly interested in their research into how other European royal families had handled similar situations and their ideas for maintaining appropriate protocols while operating independently. Eugenie spoke about her passion for her anti-trafficking work and her desire to expand her advocacy efforts. She explained that she had already begun transitioning some of her charitable relationships to operate on a more independent basis. Her experience in the art world had taught her about building networks and creating sustainable organizations, skills she felt could transfer to her humanitarian work. The conversation took an unexpectedly positive turn when Charles began sharing his own thoughts about the evolution of the monarchy. He spoke about his vision for an institution that could adapt to changing times while maintaining its core values and responsibilities. He saw merit in having family members who could contribute to important causes while operating with greater independence and flexibility. Rather than viewing their proposal as a rejection of royal life, Charles suggested that they might be pioneering a new model for how non-direct heirs could relate to the monarchy. Their approach could provide a template for future generations who wanted to honor their heritage while pursuing their own ambitions. This perspective transformed the conversation from one about stepping back to one about moving forward in a new way. The practical details of their proposal required extensive discussion. Security arrangements were complex, involving coordination between multiple agencies and ongoing assessment of threat levels. The king's security advisors would need to work with the sisters' teams to develop protocols that maintained appropriate protection while reflecting their new status as financially independent family members. The question of titles proved more nuanced than any of them had anticipated. Both sisters valued their royal titles as part of their identity and family heritage, but they understood that retaining them while operating independently might create confusion about their official status. They explored various options, including using their titles in certain contexts while making clear their independent financial status in their professional work. Charles raised the important issue of media management and public communication. Any change in the sisters' status would need to be carefully announced and explained to avoid confusion or speculation. The palace's communications team would need to work with Beatrice and Eugenie to develop a clear narrative about their new arrangement that emphasized positive elements like independence and expanded charitable work rather than focusing on what they were giving up. The discussion touched on family events and ceremonies where their presence would still be expected or welcome. Charles made it clear that stepping back from official duties would not mean exclusion from family celebrations, state occasions, or other significant moments. Their proposal for selective participation based on personal rather than official capacity seemed workable to all parties. As the meeting progressed, both sisters began to feel a sense of relief and excitement. What they had feared might be an uncomfortable conversation about rejection or failure was instead evolving into a collaborative planning session about innovation and opportunity. Charles seemed genuinely supportive of their desire to create something new while maintaining family bonds. The king shared some of his own experiences with balancing royal responsibilities and personal interests throughout his life. He spoke about times when he had felt constrained by traditional expectations and his appreciation for the sisters' courage in proposing a different approach. His perspective as someone who had waited decades to fully assume his royal role gave weight to his understanding of their desire for greater autonomy. Toward the end of the formal meeting, the conversation became more personal. Charles asked about their children and their hopes for the next generation. Both sisters expressed their desire to raise children who understood their heritage but felt free to pursue their own dreams without the weight of predetermined expectations. This vision aligned with Charles's own hopes for a more flexible and sustainable approach to royal family life. The meeting concluded with agreement on next steps rather than final decisions. Charles suggested a trial period where they could test their proposed arrangement and refine the details based on practical experience. This approach would allow them to make adjustments as needed while avoiding the pressure of making irreversible commitments immediately. Both sisters would work with palace advisors over the coming weeks to develop detailed proposals for their security arrangements, financial independence, and ongoing charitable commitments. They would also collaborate with the communications team to prepare public messaging about their evolving roles that emphasize positive aspects of their decision. As they left the king's study, Beatrice and Eugenie felt a profound sense of relief mixed with excitement about the possibilities ahead. The conversation had exceeded their expectations in terms of support and understanding. Rather than feeling like they were being pushed out of royal life, they felt like they were being empowered to create a new version of it that could work for them and their families. The walk through the palace corridors felt different on their way out. Instead of looking at familiar surroundings with nostalgia for what they might be losing, they saw them as part of a heritage they would continue to honor in their own way. The paintings, ceremonies, and traditions would remain part of their family story, but they would engage with them from a position of choice rather than obligation. Outside the palace, they paused before going their separate ways home to their families. The afternoon had marked a turning point, not just in their relationship with the monarchy, but in their understanding of what it meant to be royal in the modern world. They had discovered that honoring tradition and embracing change were not mutually exclusive, and that their unique position might allow them to contribute to both the monarchy's evolution and their own personal fulfillment. The weeks ahead would bring detailed planning, difficult logistics, and undoubtedly some challenging moments as they worked through the practicalities of their new arrangement. But as they stood together outside Buckingham Palace that evening, both sisters felt confident that they had found a path forward that honored their past while opening up exciting possibilities for their future. The months following their groundbreaking meeting with King Charles had been a whirlwind of planning, negotiation, and careful implementation. Both sisters had thrown themselves into the complex task of restructuring their lives while maintaining their commitments and caring for their families. The trial period they had agreed upon was proving both challenging and liberating in ways none of them had fully anticipated. Beatrice had expanded her consulting practice significantly, taking on larger projects that leveraged her strategic thinking skills and her unique understanding of organizational dynamics. Her client base had grown to include several technology companies and nonprofit organizations that valued her analytical approach and her ability to navigate complex stakeholder relationships. The increased income from this work was essential for funding their new independent operations, but it also provided her with a sense of professional accomplishment that felt entirely her own. The transition hadn't been without its difficulties. Coordinating security arrangements for her expanded travel schedule required constant communication between her private security team and the palace's protection officers. There were protocols to maintain, threat assessments to consider, and logistical challenges that sometimes felt overwhelming. However, the team they had assembled was proving creative and effective at managing these complexities while giving her the freedom to pursue her professional goals. Eugenie had embraced the opportunity to expand her role at Hauser and Wirth, while simultaneously launching her own foundation focused on supporting survivors of human trafficking. The foundation operated entirely independently of any royal funding, supported by private donors who were drawn to her authentic passion for the cause and her proven track record of effective advocacy. Working directly with survivors to develop programs and support services had given her work a depth and impact that she had never achieved through traditional royal patronages. Her foundation's first major initiative was a partnership with technology companies to develop better tools for identifying and disrupting trafficking networks online. Eugenie's Art World connections had introduced her to tech entrepreneurs who were eager to apply their skills to humanitarian causes. The project was gaining attention from international law enforcement agencies and advocacy organizations, positioning her as a serious player in the anti-trafficking movement rather than just a well-meaning royal patron. Both sisters had discovered that operating independently had enhanced rather than diminished their effectiveness in their chosen fields. Without the constraints of royal protocol, they could be more flexible in their partnerships, more direct in their communication, and more innovative in their approaches. They could travel to locations that might have been problematic for official royal visits, meet with controversial but important figures, and take positions on issues that might have been politically sensitive for working royals. The financial independence they had achieved was proving sustainable, though it required careful management and constant attention to their business development. Beatrice had hired a small team to help manage her consulting practice and handle the administrative aspects of their new arrangements. Eugenie had partnered with experienced nonprofit executives to ensure her foundation's operations met the highest professional standards. Their children were adapting well to the changes in their family circumstances. Beatrice's daughter Sienna was still too young to understand the complexities of royal life, but Beatrice and Eduardo had begun thinking about how they would explain their family's unique position as she grew older. They wanted her to understand her heritage and feel proud of her royal connections, while also knowing that her future was entirely in her own hands. Eugenie's sons August and Ernest were similarly young, but she and Jack had already begun talking about how they would help their boys understand their place in the royal family as they matured. The goal was to give them knowledge and appreciation for their heritage while making it clear that any involvement in royal life would be their own choice to make when they were old enough to decide for themselves. The sisters had maintained their close relationships with other family members throughout the transition. Their participation in family events had actually become more meaningful because it was clearly based on personal choice rather than obligation. Recent gatherings had felt more relaxed and authentic, with less of the formal protocol that had sometimes created distance between family members. Their relationship with their father had evolved in positive ways as well. Prince Andrew had expressed pride in his daughter's initiative and their success in creating independent lives. The reduction in public scrutiny of his daughter's activities had also relieved some of the pressure on him as he continued to navigate his own challenges. The family had found new ways to spend time together that focused on their personal relationships rather than their public roles. The media response to their transition had been largely positive, though it had required careful management. The palace's communications team had worked closely with the sisters to present their new arrangement as an evolution rather than a retreat. Coverage had focused on their expanded charitable work, their professional achievements, and their role in modernizing the monarchy's approach to non-direct heirs. Some critics had questioned whether they could truly claim independence while still using their royal titles and maintaining family connections. However, public opinion polls suggested that most people appreciated their effort to be self-sufficient while continuing to contribute to important causes. Their transparency about funding their own activities had helped address concerns about taxpayer costs. The most unexpected aspect of their new arrangement had been the influence it was having on conversations about the monarchy's future. Other European royal families had reached out to learn about their model, and there was growing discussion about how similar approaches might work in different contexts. Academic experts on constitutional monarchy had begun writing about their arrangement as a potential template for adapting royal institutions to contemporary expectations about independence and accountability. Both sisters had been invited to speak at conferences and forums about their experience, though they were selective about which opportunities they accepted. They wanted to share what they had learned without becoming professional speakers about royal life. Their goal was to contribute to constructive conversations about institutional evolution while maintaining their focus on their primary work and family responsibilities. The trial period was nearing its end, and all parties were pleased with how the arrangement was working. King Charles had expressed satisfaction with the outcomes and his willingness to make their new status permanent. The practical challenges that had initially seemed daunting were becoming routine, and the benefits of their increased independence were becoming more apparent with time. Looking ahead, both sisters were excited about expanding their work and exploring new opportunities that their independent status made possible. Beatrice was considering launching her own consulting firm that would focus specifically on helping organizations navigate complex transitions. Eugenie was planning to expand her foundation internationally and explore partnerships with governments and international organizations. Their success was also opening up new possibilities for their participation in royal life. Because their activities were self-funded and clearly independent, they could potentially take on roles or projects that might have been inappropriate for working royals. This flexibility was creating opportunities to contribute to the monarchy's work in innovative ways while maintaining their independence. As they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, both sisters felt grateful for the courage they had shown in proposing their new arrangement. The uncertainty and anxiety of the transition period had given way to confidence and excitement about their future. They had proven to themselves and others that it was possible to honor their heritage while creating their own path forward. The foundations they had built during the trial period positioned them well for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. They had assembled strong teams, developed sustainable funding models, and established their credibility in their chosen fields. Most importantly, they had maintained their close relationship with each other and their family while gaining the freedom to pursue their own dreams and ambitions. 5 years had passed since that pivotal meeting with King Charles, and the transformation in both sisters' lives was remarkable to witness. What had begun as an uncertain experiment in independence had evolved into a new model for modern royal life that was being studied and admired internationally. The success of their arrangement had exceeded everyone's expectations and was influencing conversations about monarchy across Europe and beyond. Beatrice had established herself as one of the most sought-after strategic consultants in London, with a client roster that included major corporations, international nonprofits, and even some government agencies. Her consulting firm, founded 3 years into their independence, had grown to employ 12 people and was recognized for its innovative approaches to organizational change and stakeholder engagement. Her unique background and perspective had proven invaluable in helping organizations navigate complex transitions and sensitive communications challenges. Her work had taken her around the world, from Silicon Valley boardrooms to refugee camps in Jordan, always maintaining the security protocols necessary for her protection while gaining experiences that would have been impossible as a working royal. The flexibility of her independent status had allowed her to take on projects and travel to locations that would have required extensive diplomatic coordination under the old arrangement. The financial success of her business had provided security for her family and enabled her to pursue passion projects that might not have been commercially viable. She had funded a scholarship program for students with learning differences, drawing on her own experiences with dyslexia to create opportunities for young people who face similar challenges. The program had helped hundreds of students access higher education and had become a model for other support initiatives. Eugenie's Anti-Trafficking Foundation had grown into an internationally recognized organization with operations on 4 continents. Her approach of combining direct service to survivors with innovative technology solutions and policy advocacy had attracted support from major tech companies, government agencies, and other foundations. The organization's annual budget had grown from modest private donations to millions of pounds in funding from diverse sources. The foundation's most significant achievement had been the development and deployment of an artificial intelligence system that could identify potential trafficking operations through analysis of online patterns and financial transactions. This technology, developed in partnership with major tech companies and law enforcement agencies, had already led to the rescue of thousands of trafficking victims and the prosecution of hundreds of traffickers. Eugenie had become a recognized expert in her field, regularly consulted by United Nations agencies, government ministries, and other international organizations. Her combination of royal heritage, professional expertise, and genuine passion for the cause had given her access to decision-makers at the highest levels while maintaining her credibility with grassroots organizations and survivors themselves. Both sisters had found that their independent status had actually enhanced their ability to participate meaningfully in royal family events. Their presence at ceremonies and celebrations was clearly motivated by personal and family loyalty rather than duty, which added authenticity to these occasions. They could speak more freely, engage more naturally with other guests, and participate in ways that felt genuine rather than performative. Their children were growing up with a unique understanding of their family heritage that seemed both grounded and healthy. Beatrice's daughter Sienna, now school-age, showed curiosity about her royal connections but also demonstrated the independence and confidence that came from seeing her mother build her own successful career. Eugenie's sons August and Ernest were developing their own interests and personalities, supported by parents who emphasized personal choice and authentic passion over inherited obligation. The financial independence they had achieved had proven even more valuable than they had anticipated. Beyond the obvious benefits of funding their own activities, it had given them psychological freedom that affected every aspect of their lives. They could make decisions based on their own values and judgment without worrying about public cost or political implications for the monarchy. Their security arrangements had evolved into a sophisticated but manageable system that provided appropriate protection while allowing them maximum flexibility in their work and travel. The team they had assembled had developed expertise in protecting high-profile individuals who operated in diverse and sometimes challenging environments. Their approach was becoming a model for other public figures who needed to balance security concerns with professional requirements. The media's relationship with both sisters had also evolved in positive ways. The transparency of their financial independence and the clear value of their work had largely ended speculation about their motivations or their burden on taxpayers. Coverage of their activities focused on their professional achievements and charitable impact rather than their royal connections, which was exactly the balance they had hoped to achieve. Their success had influenced other members of the extended royal family who were considering their own futures. Several younger royals had consulted with them about alternative approaches to royal life, and their model was being discussed as a potential template for future generations. The monarchy itself was benefiting from their innovation, as it demonstrated the institution's ability to adapt and evolve rather than simply maintain traditional approaches. International recognition of their work had brought unexpected opportunities. Beatrice had been invited to serve on the boards of several major organizations and had been offered academic appointments at prestigious universities. Eugenie had received humanitarian awards from multiple international organizations and had been invited to address the United Nations General Assembly on human trafficking issues. Looking toward the future, both sisters were excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. Beatrice was exploring the potential for expanding her consulting work into new areas, possibly including conflict resolution and post-crisis reconstruction. Her unique skills and background had potential applications in many challenging contexts around the world. Eugenie was planning the next phase of expansion for her foundation, including new programs focused on prevention and education. She was also exploring opportunities to influence policy at the international level, potentially taking on formal roles with global organizations working on human rights issues. Their relationship with each other had only grown stronger through the challenges and successes of their independent journey. The shared experience of creating something new while honoring their heritage had deepened their bond and created a partnership that extended beyond family into their professional lives. They regularly consulted each other on major decisions and collaborated on projects where their different expertise could complement each other. The impact of their decision extended far beyond their own lives. They had demonstrated that members of royal families could contribute meaningfully to society while maintaining financial independence and personal autonomy. Their success had influenced conversations about inherited privilege, public service, and the evolution of traditional institutions in democratic societies. As they looked back on their journey from that uncertain morning 5 years earlier, Both sisters felt profound gratitude for the courage they had shown in proposing a different path. The risks they had taken had led to rewards they could never have imagined, not just in terms of professional success and financial security, but in personal fulfillment and authentic contribution to causes they cared deeply about. The future remained full of possibilities. Their children would grow up with models of how to honor heritage while creating independent lives. The monarchy would continue to benefit from their innovation and their demonstration that tradition and change could coexist successfully. Most importantly, they had proven to themselves and others that it was possible to write their own story while respecting the stories that came before them. Their success stood as a testament to the power of thoughtful planning, family support, and the courage to pursue authentic paths even when they diverged from traditional expectations. The legacy they were creating would influence not just their own family, but potentially generations of public figures who sought to balance inherited responsibilities with personal dreams and ambitions.